Thanks for having us. It's always a pleasure to present. As he was introducing us as a nickel company, I was thinking, well, in fact, that's what we started as, Power Nickel. We're actually changing the name in a couple of weeks to Power Metallic to represent our significant shift that the discovery of the Lion Zone has done to the company and transformed it from a nickel sulfide project to really a polymetallic project with a heavy amount of copper concentration. So we'll walk you through that as we go through the presentation. Not going to tell you anything we don't believe is true, but it's investment. You're always entitled and should do your own due diligence. Let me go through the reasons why I think it's such a compelling investment to look at Power Nickel at the moment. I find personally as an investor that one of the things I first check is what's the cash situation of the company, and are they cashed up? Because if they're not cashed up, that means doesn't matter how good the story is, they're coming to the market. That's going to suppress the price. So we're fully cashed up. We raised 20 million in end of June, and so that was fantastic. And it's not just getting the cash, but who we got the cash from. I think was important. Half of it came from Robert Friedland, 20% from Rob McEwen, and the balance from some major mining funds. So I would call that smart money, and they joined a list of smart money. We have, I think, at last count, 14 billionaires in the deal. And that's how we've basically built this thing sort of one by one, getting ultra high net worth investors, and now we're starting to move into more of an institutional thing, but we're well cashed up. That's significant because, we have a lot of catalysts that we can deliver on, and we're starting to deliver them. If you're following the Power Nickel news, you're seeing us deliver news every 3 or 4 weeks, major news that's moving the dial, and we'll get into a bit more of some of that news today and walk you through it. Some of the other highlights that we'll talk about today are the potential for us to build the downstream nickel powder plant with a key industry partner, how North American nickel is different than nickel elsewhere in the world and why that's significant, and then touch a little bit on the commodity markets and why we think they're about to rebound. Let's set the stage where we're at in the world. We're basically in Quebec, Canada. So Quebec is arguably the best jurisdiction in the world, I think, for critical minerals. 3 big reasons why. Number one, infrastructure is largely in place. So in our particular project, we can literally drive off a major highway route north, 3 lanes at that point, right to the site, right to the rig. So that's fantastic. Right across the street is a Hydro-Quebec substation. So we have power and roads right at our doorstep. We're 8 kilometers away from the town of Nemaska. Nemaska's got a regional airport, accommodation and food and whatnot for our workers. And it's also the home of the James Bay Cree. So they're our First Nations partner. And the Quebec government has done a really great job of working with the James Bay Cree and with all the First Nations, really, and empowering them and making them partners in the project. So they very much see the resource development as a positive for them, and they're very pro-mining. There's 4 mines in the territory, 2 built, 2 being built. So that's a very positive thing. So community risk can often be a very big risk in mining, so that's not a problem here. Finally, the other big attraction in the Quebec is the fiscal terms. So, as an example, when we raised this money, from Mr. Friedland and Mr. McEwen and others, we raised it at $1.25 a share. Even today, the stock is not that; it's maybe 77 something, 78, something like that. At the time when we did the deal, the stock was 66 cents. So we got a 1.9 times multiple by doing a strategy that's available in Quebec and in Canada, where you can sell to high net worth Quebecers who are looking for tax deductions, and they immediately resell to the actual end investors, so it ends in permanently, investor hands. But we got 1.9 times the cash to work with. We've gotten as high as 3, and the average is around 2. So that's a phenomenal anti-dilutive provision going forward for the exploration side of the business. On the development side, similarly, there is a raft of benefits that will basically get you about half of your cost from the governments, federal or provincial. So that's a significant plus for Quebec, and we really think that positions it well on the global stage. All that isn't worth a hill of beans unless you have a great mineral deposit to work with. And we're growing an amazing mineral resource at Nisk. We started off as I said as a nickel project, a nickel sulfide. So the lower left-hand corner that we grew from 3.1 million tons of 1.5% to it's over 8 million tons now. And in looking for more nickel, honestly, we stepped out on what was an ultramafic expression at surface, about 5.5 kilometers to the northeast of NIST, and basically hit the discovery hole of the line zone. And it was almost 8 meters of 1.5% copper, like 1 ounce PGM. So a great discovery hole, but not even a top 10 hole for us anymore. We followed that up in January through April and drilled 16 holes. 15 of the 16 hit, and half of them were spectacular. You're getting 14 meters of 12% copper. I mean, it was just insane. And overall, it really drove a lot of attention to the stock. Stock made a major move, and that obviously allowed us to do this funding and get some very high-profile individuals like Robert Friedland and Rob McEwen involved for the second time. So that was all good, but it also enabled us to get some thought leadership. As important as it is to have money in this business, the scientific expertise is critical. We've obviously had a great team. They found the discovery. They've grown the discovery. That's Ken Williamson and Adam Finlay and Joe Campbell on the team at GeoVector. Ken works, obviously, directors for us as a VP of X. But we were never experts in polymetallics. They're pretty rare. So when we made the discovery, realized this is what we had, we reached out and we were able to secure the services of Dr. Steve Beresford. So Steve used to be chief geo at First Quantum, then at MMG, and then chief scientific officer at IGO. Those are 3 back-to-back hits in the polymetallic world. So this guy knows polymetallics as well as anybody in the world. And he brought a very particular set of skill sets to us, first as an advisor, and then he joined the board after he came to the site and saw the amazing conditions at the site. So he was pretty impressed. This is his concept of how to look at the deposits that he's interested in finding. They're called orthomagmatic nickel copper PGE deposits. So some of them, as an example, are these are the biggest mines in the world and the most valuable. So it's not the most valuable mine isn't a gold mine or a diamond mine or even a uranium mine. It's a polymetallic mine. So literally the beast that's in the middle here is this thing called Oktyabrsky, or otherwise known as Norilsk. And you can see that they can tend to be, some like Voisey's Bay are more nickel-y, and then you've got Chanel and Chennai and others that are more coppery, and then you've got some PG ones up top. But the really where you want to be is in this heart, where you want to be sort of equal parts nickel, copper, and PGs, or noble metals if you add gold and silver in, and that's likely where we're going to be. So we're mostly resembling at this point Norilsk and Sakatti. So those are amazing things to resemble. When you think about Norilsk, remember it's the most valuable mine in the history of the world. $1.4 trillion worth of materials in the ground. And think of it, 90% of it was produced from being produced from 1 square kilometer. So it's just amazing how big that mine is and how small the footprint is. So it's pretty interesting. So speaking of that, what does our footprint look like? We've got about a 5-kilometer stretch between our discovery of the nickel at NIST to the line zone in the northwest, so 5.5-kilometer stretch, and we're basically bringing them together. Steve Beresford's his current philosophy is that most likely these two are connected. There's really sort of 2 situations here. Generally, in these polymetallics, the nickel sulfides act as the oven, and then some sort of hydrothermal action comes down, picks up the nickel sulfides, and picks up the copper sulfides, brings up the surface, and then dissipate in these high-grade chutes, which is what the line zone is. And the key to successful polymetallic exploration is finding those chutes, finding the extensions, and finding their twins, because there's generally never just one. There's usually several. So you have one that is more copper dominated, one that's more PGE dominated, one that's more precious metals dominated, and one that's more maybe zinc dominated. So we're on the search for that right now. We're doing some specific tools that Steve brought to the table. So we did a gravity survey across the entire project, ground EM, and we're using downhole EM, and it's been super impactful. We just released this on Monday, I guess, this most recent release. So already we've had a pretty massive strike length, 550 meters. You can see those are samples we pulled across the 550 meters. So, ranging, probably averaging over 10% from 5 to 32 meters, averaging probably maybe 15 plus. So it's a very healthy intersection that's spread across a very long section of ground right now. That's basically adjacent to this exposed ultramafic It's about 1.85, 1.9 kilometers long. So will it go the full length? We think it will. And it could go beyond that. So you start to put some numbers together on this, and it really gets ridiculous. And the interesting thing about these projects, these orthomagnetic nickel copper PG or noble metal projects, is that, typically for every ton of copper sulfide you get, you're going to discover somewhere between 2 to 7 tons of nickel sulfides underneath. So, and let's say right now at the 550, we're at 5 million tons. We wouldn't argue with that. We think that's probably close. We've just stepped out another 150 meters and banged it again. So while we don't have the assays on that hole, we have stepped it out to 700 meters successfully. So, the first 550 meters extension was done basically on 10,000 meters of drilling. We're doing 30,000 meters of drilling now between now and end of April. We've done a bunch already, and these are starting to come out now. This first one will come out probably just before Christmas, somewhere in the next 10 days, and it's continuing to grow and be super successful. One of the things that's driving this success is we're using a technique called downhole EM, and it basically turns your 6-inch drill hole into like a 200-meter window. So when you have a successful hole, like the hole 70 here, which is 32 meters of 7% copper equivalent, just an insane number, nothing like it in the last 30 years anywhere. It instantly turned that hole into a 200-meter window around it, what's left. So the next hole we'll be reporting will be, this was 70, 76 is over here, so we'll be reporting on that. So, it's been very interesting to use that technique, and it's really sort of optimized our exploration programs. And you can see that we're open to the west, we're open to the east, and we're open to the south. So this is a tiger by the tail. What does that mean to us valuation-wise? Well, this is sort of how we sort of see the positioning of the polymetallics in the world. So right now we're about 150 million market cap. Wouldn't take a stretch to see us resource-wise get up to Adriatic's fine resource, in the 20 million range by the end of April. So does that mean we're going there valuation-wise into the billions? I think that's likely, but we'll see. The market will decide, but certainly the news is great. The other interesting part of our story is that while we're pushing the envelope on the exploration grounds and having great success, we've also done some interesting work on the business development side. So when we were a nickel sulfide story, we got contacted by this group, CVMR. They're the largest private nickel refiner in the world, 18 plants around the world, and they're building another 3. So they contacted us because they wanted to build another plant in North America. They needed a nickel source. Obviously, we're the last sort of high-grade one that's available. So we talked. We ended up, they've been hired. They're doing a feasibility study right now on developing the project at NISC. Along the pathway, in conversations with the Korean Battery Metal Complex, a desire came up to have nickel access sooner, nickel powders. So we looked at, and we're looking at a plant in Texas that could start as early as 2027. Concept on that would cost about 140 million US to build. It would produce 180 million a year in EBITDA. So that's a pretty amazing number. Obviously, we're still negotiating the final terms on all this, and more news on that probably in Q1. The interesting thing about their approach to nickel is they make mostly nickel powders and nickel shapes. So nickel powder is growing at 26% per annum. Big 3 uses for it are EVs. It's the best way for battery companies to receive nickel is as nickel powder, way better than MHP. Second big use is in armaments, so missiles and rocket ships and that sort of thing. And the third is in 3D printing. So, for example, if your BMW breaks down, as mine did the other day, and I had to go to get a part, and I went to get the part, they actually spun it up in the back room, so they 3D printed the part. So that's why this business is growing very rapidly. Nickel powders, unlike nickel concentrate, which might get 16,000 a ton right now, nickel powders are getting between $40,000 to $60,000 a ton. So an extra 4,000 or so in costs and a lot more margin. So clearly, this is a great business. It's also a very environmentally friendly business. It's the most efficient way, energy-wise, to make nickel. There's 3 ways to make nickel: smelting, hydrometallurgy, and this chemical metal vapor process. So it's a pretty interesting story, and we'll keep you posted on that as we develop it. We touched base on the commodity thing. I think people that are listening know that inherently commodities are downish. Actually, the price-wise are in still a reasonable quartile, a top quartile of commodity pricing overall. It just hasn't had its big move yet. And I think you can see this on the charts. There's many such charts that suggest that equities are toppy and commodities are bottomy. And this is often a great time to be looking at good commodity investments like power nickel. Some of the other edges that we have, just as we're wrapping up, is we're probably going to be the greenest mine in history. And how we're able to do that is just by the benefit of our location. Hydro-Quebec, obviously, green hydropower will power the mine. It's an ultramafic deposit, so it naturally sequesters CO2 very well. It also is their approach on energy development in terms of the nickel smelting is the most efficient. There's no external air, no external water, and we'll build a recycling facility into it. So that'll take us cradle to grave. So that'll, they say it'll lead to higher prices. I'm not sure on that, but for sure it'll lead to better offtake partners, and that'll be certainly economically beneficial to our shareholders. How do we find all this stuff so quickly? We've come out of nowhere in the last 2 years. Well, this has been one of the tools, the ambient noise tomography. It's super sensitive seismic. So that little thing on the right-hand side is called a geode. We put that on the screen and it goes down into the earth with a sound pulse, comes back to the sound map, and they have some algorithms that take that, compare it to your drilling data, your downhole EM, your airborne EM, your mag, your gravity, and they are able to really get a great visualization of the deposit subsurface. It also gives you great lithographic control, and you're able to identify basically at what velocity the rock is being mineralized. So in our case, on the nickel sulfide side of the things, we know that between 36 and 3750, that's where our mineralized zone is. So we're basically, drilling along that pathway, and we know that if geologists and geophysicists give us 20 targets, and 12 of them are 5,000 meters a second or higher, well, we don't drill those, so we can focus on the core drilling. So that led to quicker discovery for sure, and more efficient use of resources. Last thing to talk about is we have approved at our shareholder meeting just last week to spin out our BC and Chile operations. That'll be done. We're now learning it's going to be done early January for tax reasons. But that'll be for every 20 shares of Power Nickel you have, you'll get 1 share of the new co. But there'll be a tenth less shares outstanding. So Power Nickel's got, give or take, 190 million shares outstanding, and the new co will only have 19. So it's going to be a nice benefit for you. This used to trade in the 25-30 million range before we had NISC. So what will open up that, we're not sure, but it's going to be a pretty interesting project. We've got a very hot gold copper project in BC, literally in the Golden Triangle, right next to Scotty Resources, which is a junior I already like. And then you've got the Chile projects, which are right next to Candelaria. And we had 40 meters of 0.7% copper there, haven't followed it up. So Fleet is down there right now doing some research for us on that. So pretty excited about what we can bring to the table there. The other thing it will do is it should flush out the short sellers. Like all Canadian mining companies, we're dealing with these really negative influences that have impacted our stock price. Even though we've done very well this year, we should be much, much higher. And this might be one of the ways to get rid of them. So we'll see how that unfolds in January. The board is and the team is very lean, very focused. Peter is our lawyer chairman, Greg, ex-banker and current silver miner, Steve, obviously, Ken, and Les. So really good team moving together for a few years. So very tight team. This is sort of the balance sheet. The key, share registry, pardon me. The key thing to keep in mind is that more than 50% of the company is in very firm hands. Myself and my family have been the biggest investor over the last couple of years, so we put in several $1 million. And all these investors listed, like Friedland and McEwen and CVMR and the Stern family, have all invested on the way through. So that's a very good sign. So the people that know the deal the best are continuing to invest, and that's why you should be considering Power Nickel. So that's the Power Nickel story. Happy to turn it over to some questions, and we'll go from there. Thanks again.
Well, thank you very much for the great presentation. Terry, always a pleasure to have you in. So obviously anyone who has question can Q&A box, please do so as you have the chance to ask Terry the latest on the project. So Terry, we saw earlier and throughout the day we'll be seeing also more, but a lot of talks about copper. You guys are obviously Power Nickel, but there are also copper in it and so on. it feels a bit that those critical metals have been running through successive bubbles and so on. Of everyone thought that there would be never be enough of it, never enough copper and so on. It was predicting the end of copper prices exploding and so on. How do you position yourself as an exploration company into this timeline of having to navigating through those ups and down, and so on? And how are you able to secure strategic partnerships such as you have, which obviously enhance the story at a very, very, very different level?
Yeah, so I think for us, I mean, remember, we're looking at, a 2029, 2030 production sort of date, and that would be, sort of a really good timeline to hit. So then it's like, what's the market going to be like in 2029, 2030 across the mineral spectrum? And I would think, 90% of people would say supply chain is going to be tighter and the pricing is going to be higher. There's always a scenario where we go into nuclear winter and prices are down. About who gives a shit at that point? We're all in trouble. So I think the most practical viewpoint is that there is a lot less of materials out there. It's very hard to bring them to market, and it's highly likely that the prices will firm up from here and be good. I mean, great news about being polymetallic is that through any economic cycle, these things are enormously profitable. They're naturally hedging. So we've got, we'll have probably, Steve thinks, 11 producing minerals here. So, some will be up, some will be down, but the great thing about it is that overall your revenue stream is going to be very positive, very consistent, very profitable. So for us, we don't think that's a problem. And generally speaking, we're bullish overall on copper and nickel. We think, and we also think the PGEs are probably at the bottom of their cycle, and we have such a,
Yeah.
we're probably the greatest PGE discovery in the world right now, and it's most people don't recognize that, but separately, it's already accomplished that. And if the PGEs go up in price back to normal, this will take 7% copper equivalent to 10% very quickly.
All right. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Something else, there has been a lot of movement in your region. I mean, that being Nemaska being taken over 3 times in a row as a lithium company, selling of asset, buying of asset, and so on. Seeing so much equity being put in, move back when a project fell, and so on, where do you position yourself so geographically exactly around everything that's happening in your region, and how far away from infrastructure and so on?
Yeah, I mean, we're blessed. Literally, as I said, we're literally located off the road. You just drive past Damascus and hang a left and go up the road, and there you are to us. So we're very, in fact, Damascus that they built that, sort of they took a lot of the steps that we would have had to take, and they've already done them, so that we can piggyback on that. So we're quite fortunate. I don't think I've ever seen a site that's more easy to develop than this. It's really fantastic. We've got a cooperating community partner in the James Bay Cree. We've got tons of power. The roads are already established. We've got accommodations for our guys. We've got an airport that can fly in and out of 8 kilometers away. So it's really sensational that way. And like I would say that the majors have noticed Power Nickel, and we're in a lot of discussions with those guys. It's too early right now because this thing is, you wouldn't want to sell the next Norilsk too soon. So we can explore this as well as anybody in the world right now. I think given our team that we put together, and we're ramping it up very quickly. So I think 2025, 2024 stock almost basically quadrupled, was a great performer. I think we're going to do better in 2025. So that's a bold statement, but it's based upon what I'm seeing in the drill bit.
Great. And then you touch about it, yes, being polymetallic and so on. So basically, can you run us in a bit of equivalent, if you do know them out of your head, how much it gives, for example, copper equivalent, nickel equivalent, or other minerals that people are maybe more used to if they're not that savvy with nickel prices?
Sure. So I would say I think the analysts in Hanam were suggesting 5 million tons at least 7% copper equivalent. So that's one number. If you do the PGMs, it was around 10 grams. So it's very rich, so it's super unusual to have these very, very rich grades and quite thick intersections. That's what's the unusual thing.
Yeah.
You might get a one hit here or one hit there, but we're across 550 meters, man. This is consistent. This is like a beast. So it's a world-class copper discovery. It's a world-class platinum palladium discovery. And we've got obviously nickel and gold and silver and other minerals in there that are contributing as well. So it's really it's a one of a kind, and that's why we're so excited to be exploring it.
Well, it is a unique deposit. There's no doubt about it, and hopefully, it is only at the beginning of its mineral exploration. There might be more out there for sure. One last question before we get to the next presenter. Can you tell us a little more about the spin-off? So basically, until which date you need to own shares and so on. A bit of the details.
Yeah, I would say at this point we're probably thinking it's going to be sometime in January that the official closing of the thing will happen. It'll keep it much more efficient for us end of the year accounting wise, and probably for our shareholders. So probably I would say by maybe January 6th or something like that, people will need to be shareholders, otherwise they won't receive the spin out. So we'll actually have a formal press release on that, so people will have some time to obviously understand it and deal with it. So yeah, but that's generally what we're working on at the moment.
Perfect. Last 20 seconds on shorting the TSX. Any last comments on that?
Yeah, you know what? I think we're going to catch these guys at Power Nickel, and I think I think Donald Trump and his new team in Washington are going to go after the shorts. So if you're a shorter out there listening, you should be closing your positions so you're about to get find out how ugly it can be for you.
Well, that's for your position and hopefully sector-wide also. All right,
Cheers.
Terry, thank you very much. Thank you for all your effort that you do outside of Power Nickel also. We are all in a debt to you in the sector. And on that, everyone, I ask them to follow your story, the Power Nickel story. Go on LinkedIn, everywhere they're present, write them an email and keep following the story. Thank you very much, Terry.
Thanks, Julian. Have a great day. Cheers.